All right, good evening, esteemed judges. My name is Gil Manis, and I stand before you in firm affirmation of the resolution. My efficient partner, Tobias, and I have already proven the following points. First, that junk food is the cause of the obesity crisis, and that a tax would help to reduce junk food consumption. Secondly, that similar taxes have proven to be effective before, and that this is one of the few government policies shown to be truly effective in this area. Third, that chronic illnesses are costing the people, the government, and the economy as a whole a fortune, and this tax is justified to prevent and offset these costs. Now, having reiterated these points, I present to you the following refutation of the negation's arguments. In their first contention, the negation alleges that this tax would raise the price of junk food beyond the reach of the poorest Americans, leading them to, quote, go hungry or even starve, end quote. This claim is absurd on its face. Setting aside the presence of nutrition assistance programs like SNAP and the hundreds of food banks across the nation, the average American would hardly be in danger of starving even if they had their caloric intake. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations estimated that the daily caloric intake for an American is roughly 3,700 calories. The recommended healthy level, 2,000 calories per day. And according to the study in the Journal of Preventive Medicine, this average holds true across income brackets. That's for richer and poorer Americans alike. Now, it is true that this tax would affect the food budgets of the poorest Americans by a few percentage points, but hardly enough to induce starvation or significant hunger, as we've shown. More realistically, it would incentivize people to cut out the chips on the way home from work or the candy bar in the checkout line, to cut out the empty calories they didn't need anyway. Furthermore, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average Americans in the bottom income quintile, those spending around $25,000 per year, spend almost $1,500 a year on eating out. This money could be easily reallocated to cooking at home, which countless studies have proven to be cheaper and healthier. The statistics are clear. Nobody will starve due to a junk food tax. Now, in their second contention, the negation states that a junk food tax would be ineffective in reducing junk food consumption and obesity rates, citing a study published in the Journal of Entrepreneurship and Public Policy. The first part of this claim is clearly debunked by the examples we provided in our constructive, with areas as diverse as Mexico, Hungary, and that strange land known as Berkeley, seeing significant reductions in junk food and soda consumption after they implemented their taxes. So, while theory says this policy wouldn't work, real-world examples say otherwise. So far as our opponents claim that obesity would not decrease, because the tax would not prompt a decrease in, quote, overall caloric consumption, end quote, this misses the fundamental cause of obesity. Though years of conventional wisdom, typically funded by sugar industry lobbyists, says that obesity is largely the cause of too many calories in and too little activity, i.e. calories out, more recent evidence shows otherwise. According to Dr. David Ludwig, endocrinologist at Boston Children's Hospital and professor at Harvard Medical School, the primary cause of obesity is actually, quote, excessive consumption of foods with a high glycemic load, in particular, processed, rapidly digestible carbohydrates. These foods cause hormonal responses that fundamentally change our metabolism, driving fat storage, weight gain, and obesity, end quote. For those non-Harvard professors in the room, he means eating too much junk food and drinking too much soda, not eating too many calories in general. The science is clear. Cutting junk food and soda means cutting obesity. Finally, our opponent's argument that these taxes limit freedom of choice, that we must educate citizens rather than force them to comply. This argument is well-intentioned, but fundamentally flawed. There exists an age-old adage about government, that your freedom to swing your arm ends when it hits me in the nose. If those who consume junk foods were only harming themselves, this case could perhaps be made, but they aren't. As we discussed previously, the majority of Medicare and Medicaid spending, which make up almost half of the federal budget, go towards the very chronic conditions that are most often caused or exacerbated by a poor diet. This means that every American taxpayer has a stake in this fight, as their taxpayer dollars are funding the treatment of the diseases caused by overconsumption of junk foods. And this fight has been fought before. The tobacco companies once testified before Congress that tobacco wasn't addictive, smoking didn't cause cancer, and that consumers were choosing to use their products and not harming anyone but themselves. However, we know that this is false. Tobacco is addictive, smoking causes cancer, and it harms those around it. Not to mention the healthcare costs were being distributed to everyone through Medicare and Medicaid. The negative externalities of smoking were such that Congress saw fit to pass a tax on tobacco, a sales tax, used to pay for all the costs government incurred in treating those harmed by tobacco, and to incentivize consumers to smoke less because smoking would then be more expensive. But though Big Tobacco lost the fight, Big Sugar learned from their tactics. They funded studies, found scapegoats, and made hefty campaign contributions. Except we know they lied too. They made the same arguments, they were equally false. Sugar lights up the brain in the same areas as cocaine. Overconsumption of junk food is linked to more chronic diseases than I can list here. Sugar-sweetened cereals are strategically placed at children's eye levels, and the obesity epidemic is costing the US taxpayers a fortune. To conclude, we have proven that this tax will not drive the poorest Americans into starvation. The statistics clearly show this. A junk food tax has been effective before, and the idea that cutting junk food wouldn't affect obesity rates is false, given that the latest evidence clearly shows that junk food and sugar-sweetened beverages are clearly linked to obesity. Finally, the idea that Americans have an inalienable right to Mountain Dew is absurd. The negative externalities of obesity and other chronic illnesses brought on by overconsumption of junk food make clear the role of government in this area. Though a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages and other junk foods may be unpopular, we have clearly shown that it is an effective policy that is proven to reduce consumption of the very foods largely responsible for the chronic illnesses that plague so many. For this reason, we urge you to vote for the affirmation. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. Once again, my name is Rachel Lucy, and I stand in negation of the resolution that the U.S. government should implement a higher sales tax on junk food and sugar-sweetened beverages. To reiterate, my argument is composed of 3 points. First, that a sales tax on junk food and sugar-sweetened beverages will disproportionately harm individuals with lower incomes. Second, this sales tax will not have enough of an impact on health to warrant its costs. And third, imposing the sales tax limits individual freedoms. I will be refuting my opponent's points, and then I will reiterate my own points. The affirmation's first argument is that implementing this tax will improve public health. They explain how unhealthy sugar is and then state sugar and junk food are comparable to tobacco and alcohol, which have taxes, so therefore sugar should as well. But sugar is not the same as tobacco and alcohol. Firstly, unlike tobacco and alcohol, food is a basic necessity for people. And for some people, junk food and food with added sugar are all they have access to. As discussed earlier, individuals in food deserts may only have access to junk food or only be able to afford junk food, thus making these foods a necessity, not just a choice. Increasing the prices of these products is just harming these individuals by decreasing their access to food. Secondly, it's absurd to suggest that eating junk food affects the health and well-being of others like tobacco products and alcohol does. Part of the reason taxes for tobacco and alcohol were imposed was because of the health detriments caused not just to those who partake, but to others around them. Secondhand smoke, for example, can cause lasting health issues for those inhaling the smoke, and alcohol consumption can lead to impaired decision-making, leading to more accidents and incidents injuring others. Eating sugar is not harmful to others in the same way, and so by comparison should not be made. Therefore, comparison should not be made between sugar and harmful substances like tobacco and alcohol. Their second point is that taxes are the most efficient policy to improve health. They start by discussing how nothing else works and that sugar-sweetened taxes show a decrease in how much is bought. In regards to the first part of their argument, that nothing else besides a tax works, that is simply not true. Especially for those in food deserts, we don't effectively reduce obesity in these areas by punishing them for not having access to healthy food. It would be far more effective to instead make healthier food more accessible and educate people on healthier habits. As I discussed earlier, New York City substantially decreased consumption not by forcing people through taxes, but by educating people on how to be healthier. In regards to their assertion that taxes show a decrease in consumers purchasing those items, That does not mean people are eating healthier. People can substitute junk food that has a tax imposed with other foods that may not be taxed but may also not be healthy. For example, under many sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, diet sodas and fruit juices still contain added sugar. There is very little research into spending habits of consumers after imposing these taxes, so a decrease in sales of items that are taxed does not translate to healthier diets overall. Their final argument is that this policy will have a net positive economic impact. This again is not true because while healthcare costs may go down, they will be to the detriment of those who are the poorest. As I've stated previously, those who do not have access to healthy food will only feel an increase in prices. Without any substitutes in food that is healthier, they still don't have access and still cannot afford these foods. This means while they may decrease the amount of junk food they eat, they're not substituting with better food. People will still suffer and pay for the same health issues, along with health issues caused by decreased amounts of food. This will increase the gap between those in poverty and those who have enough money to actually choose to pay more for healthier food. Those in poverty will not see an improvement in their economic situation or in their diets, meaning this tax will cause them more harm than good. This proposed sales tax will primarily impact individuals with lower incomes and harm their well-being. Many people living in food deserts areas where only junk food is available. People living in food deserts have no choice in the food they have access to, so imposing this tax will create more hardship for these individuals. Despite the purpose of junk food and sugar-sweetened sales taxes primarily being to promote health and address obesity, it is not efficient at achieving this. Higher prices only create a burden for those with low income, while those with higher incomes are not concerned with price changes. Even if these taxes limited some consumption of healthy food, that would not solve the issue of obesity because there are other issues such as access to healthy food, exercise, and psychological issues that need to be addressed as well. Furthermore, a sales tax limits personal freedom of choice. US citizens can make their own decisions and prefer to be informed rather than forced to change their eating habits. We've already seen that how Americans react to sugar taxes in the American Revolution, but my statistics also clearly show they would never vote for this. We would leave the choice up to individuals about what they should or should not consume and give people better access to healthy food so they can make that choice. We should not decrease access to food by imposing this tax, but rather increase access to healthier foods. This would be far more efficient getting people to pay. This would be far more efficient than forcing people to pay an unnecessary tax, and the cost of which falls primarily on those who cannot afford healthy food. It is for these reasons I implore you to rule in favor of the negation. Thank you.